a beautiful thing. It grows to the quiver of a fife that sings. I can take it with the wave of my hand and place it upon my music stand. Such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful
So here we are,
thing.
last Sunday in July. Thank you very much for being here. It's going to be the last Sunday that I'm going to be speaking, I think, for 4 weeks. We have an ordination next week, and then we have a few other speakers, and then I'm traveling, so it'll be a little while before I get to address you all again, but I will be here. So this line from the Lord's Prayer kept coming into my mind this week, and so I decided to use that as the inspiration for my talk. And you all know this line. The line is, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." On earth as it is in heaven. And this is at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And this is in the Gospel of Matthew. And it is in what's called the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer is really interesting because it was actually the prayer that Jesus gave to the people after some instruction about how to pray. And, one of the things he said is in his instructions on how to pray is, "But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions." So don't just repeat some mantra maybe over and over again. Don't just repeat some affirmation over and over again, just thinking that somehow the repetition is going to make it so. He said, don't use vain repetitions. He also tells the people not to ask for particular things in the world. He says, "For your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before you ask them." So we're not supposed to ask for things. We're not supposed to just repeat phrases thinking that somehow the repetition is meaningful. And then he says to them, right before he gives them the Lord's Prayer, he says, "After this manner, therefore pray ye." And then he tells them the Lord's Prayer. And so that's why the Lord's Prayer has always been so very important in the Christian faith. And it's a wonderful prayer. And there's a lot in it that resonates with A Course in Miracles and the teaching of A Course in Miracles. And I especially like how it says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So it's bringing earth and heaven together. And unfortunately, a lot of Course in Miracles students are manifesting a tremendous gulf. It's not just a little gap, but it's a huge gulf between earth and heaven. And I think we have to really be aware of that, and we have to really work to bridge that gulf and bring earth and heaven together, like the Lord's Prayer does. A Course in Miracles unites earth and heaven. A lot of that was in the reading that Reverend Joni read. Here's a quote. It says, "Hear this, all power is given you in earth and heaven. There is nothing you cannot do." So we don't have to wait to heaven to get some experience of all of our power. All power is given to us in earth and in heaven. And I love it that it says there is nothing that we cannot do. I love those Course in Miracles passages and lessons that tell us of our ultimate power. There's a very early workbook lesson, which is, "There is nothing my holiness cannot do." It's workbook lesson number 38. And in that lesson, for those who've done the lessons and remember that, it has you identify situations that are problematic or that are troubling, and it tells you that any situation that you feel any sense of loss or unhappiness of any kind as you see it, to apply the lesson to that. So any feeling of loss, any feeling of unhappiness of any kind, think of that situation and then remind yourself that in that situation there is nothing your holiness cannot do, because your holiness has all power even here on earth as it is in heaven. Now, not only is that line in the Lord's Prayer, which we all know, or many of us know, but it's also verbatim in A Course in Miracles. And the quote, again, is this, It says the Holy Spirit is a way in which God's will can be done on earth as it is in heaven. So the exact same phrase that is in the Lord's Prayer is right here in A Course in Miracles. And the Holy Spirit, listening to the Holy Spirit, following the Holy Spirit's guidance, is how we do God's will. It's how God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. We are the ones doing God's will here on earth as it is done in heaven, because we're all still connected to heaven, and we're all still connected to God, and we're all still connected to the voice for God. And as we listen to the Holy Spirit, the voice for God, we do God's will here on earth as it is done in heaven. So God's will on earth, what is it? Well, A Course in Miracles is very clear that God's will on earth is healing, that God's will on earth is salvation. We are here to heal everything, everyone. We are here to save everything, everyone. Course in Miracles says, it, and it means the statement, the salvation of the world depends on me, but acknowledges the will of God is done on earth as well as heaven. It unites all wills on earth in heaven's plan to save the world. That's from the workbook 186. We had that lesson not that long ago. So the salvation of the world depends on us, and that's an acknowledgement that we are doing God's will here on earth. That is our mission, and that is what we are doing. Our lesson for today, the salvation of the world depends on me. This is what we're about, and this is how we bridge that gap. But we must not see the big gulf between earth and heaven, and we must bridge that huge gulf instead of accentuating it. And I see so many people wanting to accentuate it, wanting to make it bigger instead of making it smaller. We have to dedicate ourselves to wanting to make heaven and earth one, not wanting to make them separate. Heaven has a plan to save this world, and we unite in that plan. What we're doing here today, gathering here today, is uniting in that plan to save the world. We are here to do it, and we have to acknowledge that we indeed are doing it. We indeed are doing it. It's not something that we put off into the future. It's something that we recognize that we are doing now. Course in Miracles says, God wills no one suffer. That's God's will for the world. God wills no one suffer. And we do God's will by our own healing work, making sure that we are dedicated also to no one suffering. This is the will that needs to be done on earth. This is God's will on earth. Course in Miracles is very clear about this teaching. It says it over and over again. Here's another place that says, heaven and earth shall pass away, simply means that they will not continue to exist as separate states. Heaven and earth won't continue to be separate. They will be one. And we are that bridge. And I love the whole bridge metaphor and bridge analogy because my last name, Ponticello, that's actually what it means. Ponticello means bridge to heaven. I remember when I found that out, just how cool was that? That was so cool. Ponte is bridge in Italian. Cielo is the heavens or the sky. So Ponticello is bridge to heaven. But we're all the bridge to heaven, and you're certainly all the bridge to heaven with me. But I'm really aware, at this stage of my life and at this place in my life, when I look back in my life and all the things of my life, that there really has been no accidents about any of it. And there has been a plan. There has been a plan in place and a plan working itself out, and everything was just perfect to get me to right where I am today, which is right where I am happy to be. Course in Miracles says, no accident nor chance is possible within the universe as God created it, outside of which is nothing. So there's no accident or chance in earth or in heaven, which really are becoming one through our will, which is God's will, and I see that happening. And I see it in my own life clearer than I ever have in the past. Okay, so I am currently getting ready to take 2 trips. And I'm going back to see my sister Sarah. And I'm going back to upstate New York, near Syracuse, New York, which is where I was born and raised, or where this body was born and raised. And it's been a long time since I have been to visit. It's been probably 5 or 6 years. I haven't been there in a long time. And I'm going back for various reasons. But a question has come up for me about my trip back is, do I wear my priest collar when I go back to upstate New York? Okay, because I started wearing the cleric collar at the beginning of the pandemic after I received some guidance that I really had to up my game. You know, that the pandemic was challenging for me on many levels, and that it was important for me to up my game both to myself and in my presentation to the world for various reasons, which I talked about at the time. And so my guidance was to start wearing the collar. I mean, after all, I had been known as Reverend Tony for 34 years. I mean, it wasn't like some huge thing, but, you know, it's a big public, declaration of that. And this came up for me again last week when I was trying to arrange a dinner with a friend of mine, and the friend of mine said that they'd be happy to go to dinner with me as long as I didn't wear my priest collar. I couldn't show up like a priest. Now, at that moment, I said, okay, brother's asking for something outrageous, I'll do it, because, it doesn't really matter. So I had dinner with my friend. I didn't wear my priest collar. It was fine. But it then kind of begged the question, okay, the pandemic is kind of easing maybe, maybe I could not wear the collar or only wear it occasionally. And then the question came up about, should I wear it when I go back to Canastota, New York, near Syracuse? There's a lot of things that are going to happen when I go back there. There's going to be a high school reunion. That means showing up with my priest collar at my high school reunion. There's going to be a family reunion. I mean, showing up with a collar at the family reunion. And I usually go to Catholic Mass with my sister when I'm there. And I will be there for 2 Sundays, so do I go in St. Agatha's Catholic Church with my collar? Do I go up and receive communion with my priest collar? And, I wasn't sure. I just really wasn't sure. And I had to do a lot of asking for guidance. And then I got that, wearing the collar for me is a way that I bridge the gulf between heaven and earth. I mean, it's a real declaration for me that my life is dedicated to spiritual, religious principles. And I'm fine about them. And I've been fine about them for decades. And I'm fine about declaring them to the world in an obvious way. I am now. I mean, at least that is what though for me. And so I think it was yesterday or the day before, I got the guy to say, yes, I am going to go home with the cleric collar, and I'm going to have it on at least for most of the major events, and just check it out, just see how people deal with it and conversations that it starts. Of Course in Miracles says, in everything be led by him and do not reconsider. So, I've got my guidance now. I'm not going to reconsider it. I'm really clear on it. I'm going to go into that Catholic church with the collar on. I'm going to go up to communion with the collar on. And I love this church. It was the church that was there when I was a young teenager. I've actually spoken in that church twice for both my mother's memorial service funeral and my father's funeral. So I'm going to do it. Okay, people are fearful and concerned about what other people might think about them if they're open about their spirituality and their religion. And I think that just reinforces the gulf that we feel. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be ashamed of. What is it? We're afraid of rejection? I mean, who is going to reject us? I guess my friend who wanted to go to dinner, wasn't really willing to go to dinner with me as I am now. And I mean, it was okay. I was fine, but it wasn't really a positive in terms of making me particularly want to do it again and again. If somebody gives you conditions for meeting them, you have a good time, you meet them, but it might not lend itself to meeting them more frequently. For me, wearing the collar is bringing my heavenly thoughts to earth in a little bit bolder of a way. I have found in the year and a half that I have been wearing it that I have not gotten rejection at all, from people out in the world. Actually, I think more people want to talk to you when you have the collar on, when they see it. And I find most people are pretty comfortable with it. And, maybe they're just mirroring my comfort with it. But I actually see that it's a way of me bringing earth and heaven together. It's a way of being that pure reflection of the light above, which is what A Course in Miracles tells us to do. The Course says, it is His holiness that lights up heaven and that brings to earth the pure reflection of the light above, wherein are earth and heaven joined as one. So again, we bring in the reflection of the divine, and we are joining earth and heaven, which is absolutely what I want to do. I want to be about that. I am about that. That is my dedication. That has been my dedication for 34 and a half years. So, that's what I'm about. That's who I am. And it's good, and it's fun, and it's real for me. It's no sacrifice, and there's no rejection, and the things that fall away are probably things that I didn't really want in the first place. So I'm fine about just surrendering to that. And I'm fine about earth and heaven being one. And I am fine about my job in making that happen to a greater and greater degree. Course in Miracles says, for as earth and heaven become one, even the real world will vanish from your sight. The end of the world is not its destruction, but its translation into heaven. So the world isn't over because it gets destroyed. It's over because it gets translated. I mean, that's a very interesting usage of the word translation. It's like the language the world is speaking isn't understandable, but we are here to translate the language of the world into a heavenly language. We're the universal translators, like they have in Star Trek. Actually, I've been thinking of this little white thing here right at my throat as my own universal translator. It gives me the power to translate the language, the unintelligible language of the ego's world, into a divine language that people can understand and that people see reflects the heavenly truth of oneness and salvation and healing and openness. One of the things I have noticed when you walk up to people and you're presenting as a minister is they don't know what to expect. They just, especially people they just kind of don't know what to expect. And you know what? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's meeting your brothers without preconceptions of the past. There's an open moment there when you meet somebody, and they're just open to you however you present to them. And those are wonderful healing moments. And I love them, and I certainly want to seize as many of them as possible. And I'm certainly going to want to seize as many of them as possible when I travel back east to see family, friends, high school, and my all my cousins. Course in Miracles again drives home this teaching. It's all over the Course. The Course isn't about rejecting the world or thinking this world is this terrible thing that we don't want to interact with. The Course is about seeing that heaven is here even in the world. The Course says heaven is here. There is nowhere else. Heaven is now. There is no other time. No teaching that does not lead to this is of concern to God's teachers. So no teaching that doesn't lead to you seeing heaven as here and now is worth your time. And if you're seeing A Course in Miracles that way, shift, because that's actually not what it's saying. What it's saying is heaven is here and heaven is now. Heaven's here and now. It's not a place we are thinking about going to after we die. What a terrible idea that is. It's a place that we're bringing into manifestation to the best of our ability right now. Course in Miracles calls that the real world. And when we get the real world perfectly mirroring heaven's grace and love, there's a final step that God takes, and we're not even supposed to be concerned with that. So, 2,000 plus years ago, Jesus told the people the exact same thing. He told them how to pray. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Bring God's will from heaven here into the earth, and it is true today. And it's true with all of us. I thought I'd just end with just a little thinking and talking about just the idea of will. What is God's will? What does will mean? Will is one of those terms that we just say without usually thinking much about it. We think we know what it means, but do we really know what it means? Okay, I looked it up in the dictionary. Will, the faculty by which a person decides on or initiates action. Control deliberately exerted to do something or to restrain one's own impulses, like willpower. A deliberate and fixed desire of intention, a thing that one desires or ordains. I desire and I ordain salvation and healing, and that God's will that no one suffer be the manifestation of the world. And on earth as it is in heaven, for sure, through us, through Jesus, both 2,000 plus years ago and even today through A Course in Miracles, we are bridging not just that gap, but that gulf that exists in people's minds between the earthly plane and the heavenly realms. And that is our vocation, and that is my vocation, and that is our job, and that is the mission of the Community Miracle Center. So join me and join us like you're doing right here, right now, and let us make earth and heaven become one. Join us. Thank you. That's my talk for today.
A flower is a beautiful thing. It grows to the quiver of a fife that sings. I can take it with the wave of my hand and place it upon my music stand. Such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing.